healthcare associated infections. The name suggests that when a person is admitted or undergoes any intervention through any devices for diagnosis, treatment, he acquires infection for which he was not admitted for, right? He was not incubating it at the time of admission. So this is infection which is different from the infection for which the patient was admitted. What do we consider the incubation time for this thing? We consider it 48 hours. Can this infection occur after the patient goes home when he is discharged? How many of you say yes? Yes, because if he has stayed more than 2 days at the hospital, it means he has passed this time period, and if he undergoes an intervention, there is a chance that he might develop this infection after going home. Okay? Then one very important thing that is always left out, which is, are healthcare workers at the risk of developing an infection? That is also considered as healthcare associated infections amongst healthcare workers, because they are dealing with the patients, they are dealing with the body fluids, the source of infections, right? So this is the definition of healthcare associated infections. What is the definition? It is acquired in the hospital by patient admitted for reason other than the infection, which was not present or incubating at the time of admission, and it should appear at least 48 hours after admission. Okay, then it also includes acquired in the hospital but symptoms appeared when he was discharged, when he was at home. Okay, can you give me a very good example of this? Think about a surgery. If patient underwent certain surgery and he was discharged after 8 days and he developed an infection at home in the wound, will you consider that an SSI? If there is infection at the suture site, you will consider it as SSI. Okay, what is the one bad drawback here? If patient fails to take post-operative measures well, it is still accounted as SSI. Okay. Then occupational infections among the staff. For example, needle stick injury that transmitted the infection to the particular healthcare worker, that is also considered as HAI. Okay. What are the factors that could affect HAI? What comes to your mind when you think about any disease? You think of person's immunity, right? Not all people fall sick at the same level with the same severity. Not all people become prone to the infection, or there is a mortality rate among the people which is different in certain group, right? So first thing is immunity. Then broad spectrum antibiotics will cause failure of, later may develop a resistance if they are used unjudicially. Also they give good growth for the fungal organisms, right? What else? Hospital environment is propagating the MDR flora. Multi-drug resistant organisms are there in the hospital, right? Which we call as hospital organisms. Then you are doing some therapeutic intervention. For example, you are tapping ascitic fluid. You breached person's skin barrier. You performed certain surgery, right? So if you're not following aseptic measures, it can lead to infection. Then you can transfuse this person with the blood. If blood has certain organism previously, this is also a risk factor. Okay, and poor hospital administration. Why do we talk about administration here? Because you have to implement good infection prevention and control strategies. For that you need good administration. Okay. Then what are the sources of infection? Very simple. What could be the source of infection in a patient? His own flora. Patient's immune status has gone down, this flora becomes pathogenic for that particular patient. First, exogenous source, endogenous and exogenous source. What could be the exogenous source? Environmental flora, which is there in the hospital environment. It could come from water, air or surfaces. Okay, then healthcare workers' hands. Suppose there is certain healthcare worker who is carrying MRSA in his fingernails and he's touching all the patients, he might transfer this flora to the patients, right? And other patients who are getting admitted with these organisms. These are all the exogenous sources. What are the organisms implicated in HAIs normally? You can talk about E. coli and everything you want, but these escape pathogens. What are they? Enterococcus, Faecium, Staph aureus, Klebsiella, Acinetobacter, Pseudomonas, Enterobacter, which are notorious for having multi-drug resistance, are often implicated in healthcare associated infections. That is why most mortality cases are seen in these organisms. Okay. Now, how does the transmission of infection occur? There are three ways that the transmission occurs: contact, droplet and airborne. Take a look at this picture. There is this infected individual and these are all the droplet nuclei that he is spreading, out of which this less than 5 microns diameter droplet nuclei, they are considered to be airborne. What do you mean by airborne? It means they are able to travel the longer distances, okay? But these droplets which are more than 5 microns, they settle nearby. So since they are settling, where can they settle? On the surfaces, on the hands, on the face of the other person whom we are talking to, okay? This leads to droplet transmission. This droplet nuclei less than 5 micron leads to airborne transmission. And this is direct contact. Now this contact can occur in two ways. First is direct contact. What is direct contact? Through hands. What is indirect contact? Touching the patient's surrounding or patient's healthcare things such as bed rails, very good, fomites, the things that patient is using or they are lying in the patient's surrounding and they are used on the other patient. This is indirect contact transmission, okay? This picture is very important. This is the susceptible individual. Now what this susceptible individual should have done to protect himself? Very good. Personal protective equipment, okay? Just remember this much. And the precautions that you take to prevent yourself from these transmissions, we call them transmission based precautions or isolation precautions, okay? So coming to prevention of HAI, I told you about transmission based precautions. You understood that they are for three kind of transmission routes. But then what is standard precautions? Standard precautions are the precautions that you use against any patient, any fluid or any healthcare worker irrespective of his infective status. What are we considering here? We are thinking that whoever you are meeting in the hospital, whatever fluid you are touching in the hospital, whatever sharp you are coming across in the hospital is infected. So you have to take some standard precautions to prevent yourself, your colleague and your patients from that, other patients from that infection, okay? These IPC practices should be followed for all individuals, all specimens and all needles and sharps. You don't have to consider, oh, this is the bed number A is HIV positive patient, bed number B has just come for cold and cough and fever. So I'll not take precautions in case of B. This you don't have to do. You have to take as many as standard precautions you took for bed number A. Okay, understood? What is comprising of standard precautions? Very first important thing, hand hygiene. What is hand hygiene in your term? Hand wash or hand rub. Who invented hand hygiene? There is a story behind hand hygiene, why it came into practice worldwide. Why is WHO endorsing hand hygiene so much? There was a scientist physician who was working in labor ward, in a gynae ward. Beside that gynae ward, there was a mortuary. What is mortuary? Where you perform autopsy on a dead body. Okay? So this person noticed that there is a lot of maternal mortality rate in that particular ward because the person who was performing autopsy was directly coming and performing delivery on the female patients. Okay. So, when he proposed that you need to wash the hands and then perform the delivery, mortality came down by 90%. Can you imagine? 90% is a very big number. But during those days, he was questioned, his theory was not accepted by his own peers. It took them almost 50 years to understand this, and this was before germ theory was invented, okay? So this person has changed life across the world. His name was Ignaz Semmelweis, okay? That is when hand hygiene became a practice. His contribution is very big to the medicine, and whenever you are working in the wards in the hospital, you should remember to wash hands between patients mandatorily. Okay? That is about hand hygiene. Then comes personal protective equipment. You know about personal protective equipment? Biomedical waste management, you know? Spillage cleaning. What is spillage cleaning? If any fluid or blood falls, you have to do not mop it like a general practice. You have to first clean it with disinfectant. What is this disinfectant we use? Sodium hypochlorite. We will see that in detail later. Then disinfection of patient care items. We are disinfecting every patient care item. Don't do this. What is that patient care item? One item you tell me. Thermometer, BP cuff machine, stethoscope. All these are patient care items. Then environmental cleaning. Respiratory hygiene and cough etiquette. What is this? Stop eating your teeth. What is this? What is respiratory hygiene and cough etiquette? And should it be practiced only in the hospital? Respiratory etiquette should be practiced in public. What is respiratory etiquette? Whenever you are coughing or sneezing, you have to use a personal handkerchief. Okay, if you do not have that, use your hands, wash your hands immediately before shaking hands or touching others or your face. Okay, if that option is also not available, you have to sneeze on the inner fold of your sleeve. Okay, if you are standing in the group, you have to go away and cough or sneeze and join the conversation again. But if 4 people are standing, don't cough or sneeze on their face. That is respiratory etiquette and cough hygiene. Okay. And then lastly, safe use and disposal of sharp. Sharps, don't talk. Sharps are to be disposed in the white puncture-proof container. Do not recap your needles. Do not pass them in hand. And anything else you want to tell? Whenever you are generating this waste on the patient bedside, discard it immediately. Don't wait for the other person to come and help you. Okay? These are all standard precautions. I'll ask at the end what are standard precautions. What is the first precaution? Second, hand hygiene. I'll not go into the detail. You know what are the 5 moments of hand hygiene? We started doing hand hygiene. What are the 5 moments of hand hygiene? Before and after touching the patient. What is the 4th hand hygiene moment? That is 5th one. What is the 4th one? After exposure to any body fluid. Okay. Don't have to follow the sequence, but to remember, it's easier to remember like that. Okay. Then how many steps are there in hand hygiene? Okay, you started, you do it. Anybody wants to show? Let's do it together. Palm to palm. Okay. Both hands. Palm to palm. Dorsum both hands. Interlacing. Thumb. Tips of the fingers. This is the picture that will guide you through it. Then personal protective equipments. Can you name some personal protective equipments? Talking of mask, what kind of masks do you know about? You know only about N95 mask. All of you work in the factories. Huh? Surgical mask. Talking about surgical mask, how to wear a surgical mask? So whenever you are don't talk amongst yourself. Whenever you are wearing this mask has 3 layers. Can you see this? This outer layer is hydrophobic. This inner layer is hydrophilic. Just make sure whenever you are wearing this mask, these folds should be facing downwards. Don't look at me, look at the picture. These folds should be facing downwards. Can you give me the reason why this should be facing downwards? That is first thing. Second thing is, if you are wearing this mask inside out, it will not help you because this layer is hydrophobic. It will gather all the particles from the air and put it on your mask and you're inhaling that. This also helps to absorb any sweat that is there when you are wearing the mask. This mask is for one use. You should discard this mask if it is wet or within 4 to 6 hours. Okay, I'll not repeat all of these things. These are very technical things. Nobody will tell you. Remember how to wear a surgical mask. Sometimes this nasal band is given downwards and you just follow the manufacturing defect. Use your brains and wear the mask properly. How to wear a glove? Remember that inner part of the glove is for you and outer surface of the glove is for the patient. So whenever you are wearing sterile gloves, do not touch outer surface of the gloves. Okay, we will hold a demo class for this, but I'm just telling you the important technical things. Okay. What about gowns? Even gowns you will see. Okay. One important thing, while discarding your mask, what will you do first? You will tie this thing and then the lower band. And while removing, what will you do? Lower and then upper, and then you tilt forward and remove mask like this. कि ऐसे करके खींच के तोड़ के ऐसे मास्क नहीं निकालना है. क्यों? उस पे जो माइक्रो ऑर्गेनिजम्स है, ड्रॉपलेट्स है, they will splatter in the air. So with minimum shakiness, just remove it, tilt forward, remove the mask and discard. Okay? Same with the gown. What about gown? Whenever you are wearing this gown, can you see this gray area is for yourself and this is outerwards. Do not touch outer surface while removing the gown. Pull it from inside, fold it because outer area is contaminated. Roll it into a bundle like this, minimize its surface area and discard. Okay? What about the respirators? Respirators should always be fitting, they should not be loose. Respirator means N95, don't get confused. Okay? They should not be loose, they should fit to your mouth. This is also a demo thing, we need to arrange a demo for all these things. Okay. Coming to spill management. I told you about spill management. Whenever there is a splash of blood or any fluid that has fallen on the ground, on the surface, any surface, except urine, what do you have to use to clean this? Sodium hypochlorite. What is the procedure? First, you will have to inform everyone that do not walk on this area. So, you will have to cordon off the area. You put the some caution board. You will put some caution board. Okay. Then in the hospital, there is availability of spill kits always, which contain the important things that you need to manage the spill. Okay. So the person who is performing spill management has to wear all the protective layers. PPE kit पहनने के बाद what will that person do? If it's a big volume on the floor, you have to soak it with the absorbent material and remove it into the yellow bag. You have to label this bag as spill. Okay. Then you pour some, on gauze piece, you pour some sodium hypochlorite. You leave it for 10 minutes. After 10 minutes, you remove it with the help of forceps or cardboards. Do not touch anything. Okay. With gloved hands, do not touch it. Just use cardboards. Remove it into the yellow bag and label it. After performing this, remove all the PPE kits, put it into the yellow bag and perform hand hygiene. This is how you manage spill in the hospital. Except urine. In case of urine, what will you use? Izole or phenol. Okay. Do not put sodium hypochlorite on urine if there is a urine spillage. Okay. This is in short about spill management. This is which kind of precaution? Standard precaution. Okay. Coming to transmission based precaution. Transmission based. Yes. 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 You remove all the things into this bag, you label it as spill and you transfer it to biomedical treatment waste facility. Okay. Similarly, there is mercury management also. Mercury spillage is there. That has to be done very carefully because mercury is not very good element to, you cannot touch mercury with hands, and if it's a big mercury spillage, it's better you evacuate the area. You have to open all the doors and windows, and you have to collect these particles into the sealed container with the help of torch and with syringe. You have to put them into the water and seal that thing, and you have to inform CPWF that this is mercury so that they don't put it in the general waste that they are discarding. Okay. Why are we dealing with mercury like this? What will happen if you touch it? How many of you watched Dhurandhar? What was plotted against Ibrahim? You should have been able to answer this question if you watched the movie. I'm talking about dimethyl mercury. These people were sleeping in the theaters. Okay, next. Coming to first precaution, that is contact precaution. Contact precaution mein, what is the most important personal protective equipment? Very good. Who? Kaun bola glove? You said it. Don't answer. These people have to answer. Anything else other than glove? Mask for contact precautions. Boots. Huh? What PPE kit? You mean gown? Gown? Yes. Okay. So, what are the agents transmitted through contact? When you understand this, you will understand why are we needing gowns and gloves. See, all the MDROs can be transmitted through contact by touching. Okay, then enterically transmitted hepatitis viruses A and E. What is the route of transmission? Fecal-oral route. Conjunctivitis cases, adenovirus, gonococcus, chlamydia. Why? You will directly go and rub your eyes to the patient. You will touch it with hands and then put the hands into eyes, right? Then any contagious skin lesions. Everything is coming in contact with hands. So, The most essential PPE kit in case of contact transmission is gloves and gown. Okay. IC measures for all the precautions almost remain same, which include hand hygiene, PPE, but which PPE you have to mention. See here what is most important, gloves and gowns. You can add surgical mask and protective eyewear, but these are essential. If you are just wearing surgical mask and going and touching this patient, it is not protecting you. Okay. Then single-use patient dedicated equipment, very important. You have to cohort this patient in the patient having same diagnosis if you do not have place for isolation. Okay, then while transferring the patient, you have to minimize this transfer. Do not take patient for strolling in the hospital, keep him at the one place. Okay, try to confine him at the one place. And daily disinfection of the room. These measures are almost same for contact, droplet and airborne precautions except some changes that are essential that you have to add. For example, in case of droplet precaution, what is the most important PPE kit? Which mask? Surgical mask. Okay. What do you think is the use of surgical mask? Is it protecting you from any airborne organism? How many of you say yes? Why is it known as surgical mask? What might happen while performing the surgery? Does it have a name? Huh? Blood might get splashed on your face. So you're protecting yourself from any kind of splash. You're wearing eye goggles, you're wearing mask. What will protect you from the organisms? N95 mask. Okay? What is the important thing here in case of droplet? Surgical mask. What are the agents that can transmit through droplets? These are the organisms. Influenza viruses, you might have seen many people start wearing masks during the winter season. During winter season, these people are wearing masks, surgical masks. Why are they doing that? To not give this infection to the other person. Okay. You understand the concept behind surgical masks. Then, what is AGP? They are saying that you have to use surgical mask in droplet precaution or N95 when AGP is performed. What is AGP? AGP is aerosol generating procedure. What is aerosol generating procedure? Aerosol generating procedures are those procedures which will produce aerosols when you are performing certain intervention on the patient. Very common example, CPR. What is CPR? Cardiopulmonary resuscitation. Okay. Any other example you can give? Tracheostomy. You are performing oral suctioning of the patients. When he is tracheostomized, you are cleaning the secretions in the trachea. That can also lead to aerosol generation. Or you are intubating the patient. All these are what? Aerosol generating procedures. Then you have to wear N95 mask. Okay? Rest other things are same. Coming to airborne precautions. What are the agents? Common example? Okay, coronavirus. Okay, and यहाँ पे लिखा है ना MTB फर्स्ट इस पे. स्मॉल पॉक्स है क्या अभी? कहाँ पे है? Where is smallpox strain kept in the world? Have we destroyed it completely? Okay, other than airborne precautions, you were talking that we need N95 respirator. What are the other things we can do? Patient placement, for the patient placement, we have special airborne isolation rooms. What are these rooms? What do these rooms do? These rooms have negative pressure. What that means? It means that the internal air that is circulating here should not, if it is going outside, then will it not, which kind of pressure do you have in your lungs? What is happening then? Air is coming in or going out? Then what kind of pressure do you have in OTs? What happens there? Air doesn't come from the outside, but inner air goes out. Okay. So what will happen here? What you have to do is, these rooms, if you do not have this kind of placement, you will try to keep these areas as much as naturally ventilated as you can. If there is a certain room which do not have negative pressure, you will open all the doors and windows to that room. Okay. Secondly, whenever you are placing, if you place these beds here, will it help you? This air will be blocked and this air will carry all the organism across. So this airflow has to be unhindered like this. Okay, this is the placement of the room. These are the important things that you have to remember. Plus, if there is negative pressure in the room, minimum air changes in negative pressure room. In case of tuberculosis, it should be minimum 12. How much is this in OT? In OT, there are minimum 20 air changes per hour, out of which 4 are at least fresh. Okay? Here, they are 12. Okay. That was about transmission-based precautions. Now, I'm telling you all about these precautions and all this HAIs. We talked about administration in the beginning. From administration, we have something called as Hospital Infection Control Committee, which is an advisory committee to the medical superintendent, which looks after the information sharing and education, training and surveillance of HAIs within the hospital. Okay. Who is the chairperson of this committee? Medical superintendent. Who is the secretary? HOD of microbiology. Who is the HICO? Any clinical microbiologist. Who is the HICN? Infection control nurse. We have ma'am with us today. She is the infection control nurse of our hospital. Okay. If you have any queries related to IPC, you can ask her. Then head of all clinical departments, nursing superintendent, then in charges of everything possible that is there in the hospital, including OT supervisor, CSSD, pharmacy, linen laundry, kitchen, engineering department, epidemiologist, everybody takes part in HICC. Okay. What is the function of HICC? HAI surveillance, first of all, education and training, vaccination of the healthcare workers for recommended vaccines. What is commonly given to the healthcare workers? And tetanus. That is most mandatory. Okay. Education about all this. Be looking after staff health through vaccination. Then outbreak management. What is outbreak management? What is outbreak? Any kind of cases of the same disease appearing in the large number, proven clinically and by laboratory. Okay, that is all. That was about HAI. Now you have understood the background of HAI, that how HAI happens and what can be done to prevent HAI. There are 4 HAIs that we are going to talk about, out of which 3 are device associated infections. Why device associated infections? Okay, firstly, if I talk about HAI, can a healthcare worker who developed scabies after dealing with the patient call it a hospital acquired infection? If this patient had any contagious lesion and he acquired it from this patient, can you call it a hospital infection? Let's say conjunctivitis. His patient had conjunctivitis and nurse also developed a conjunctivitis. Is it a hospital acquired infection? Yes. Why did it happen? Because she did not take contact precautions. Okay. That is there. So you understood what is healthcare associated infections. One more example. If a patient was admitted for UTI, he was there in the hospital for a very long time. This patient had, let's say this patient had pyelonephritis. But after going home, this patient had stayed in the hospital for a very long time, and this patient after going home developed respiratory symptoms, cough, cold, fever, respiratory distress. What is your clinical diagnosis? Could be pneumonia. Can you call it hospital acquired pneumonia? Yes, because he might have acquired it in the hospital. Okay. What could be the possible pathogen? That is more of a community acquired pneumonia. Any of the MDROs, escape pathogens that we talked about initially. Okay. So now that you have understood, here in the major 4 types, I will talk about device associated infections. In that, what devices am I talking about? Am I going to talk about? I am talking about catheter, I am talking about central line and ventilator. And the 4th one is the surgical site infection. As the name suggests, what is surgical site infection? Any person who underwent surgery and the surgical site has developed an infection. So, surgical intervention. Okay, that is there. Then, most common HAI, device associated most common HAI is COTY, because catheter is most commonly that is put in the patients, other than ventilator and central lines. Not all patients require all the devices. Based on this, what are the definitions? Based on this, first you see here that it could be symptomatic or asymptomatic. But what will be the first criteria? That the catheter should be present. Catheter should be present for more than 2 calendar days or 48 hours. Okay. Then you are seeing if the patient has symptom or not. If the patient has symptoms, it is considered as COTY. If does not have symptoms, it is considered as catheter associated asymptomatic bacteriuria. Okay. What are the causative organisms? Most commonly E. coli. Anything else? Klebsiella, Acinetobacter, Pseudomonas, Proteus, all these organisms. Okay. Now, pathogenesis, you need to know what are the major sites from where this infection can go into the patient. Can you see this is bladder, this is urethra. What is this? This is urethral tube. Okay. Have you heard about Foley's catheter? Foley's catheter is the commonly used catheter in urinary catheters. Okay. So what you have to do is, there is a Urobag attached to this Foley's catheter, and whenever you are placing it in the patient, there are two ports. You can see that this is a tube which is connected to the Urobag, and this is a balloon inflating port. You put air into this port and this balloon will inflate and it will be placed inside the bladder. So if you are inflating this balloon, you have to be very careful not to rupture urethra. This is also a very important thing that you have to do while internship. Do not do it before without supervision. Okay. Don't be overconfident and ruin people's lives. So this has to be performed under supervision. So what happens here is, can you see, first site from where the infection can go when catheter is placed is urethral meatus and catheter junction, from where this catheter is entering the urethra. Okay. Then there is junction between the drainage tube and bag. Then this drainage bag itself and the outlet valve. From where will you collect the urine sample? If catheterized patient, from sampling port. You will not take it from the urine bag. Okay. Okay, that I have told you. Pathogenesis, you kind of understand by yourself that urine is acidic in nature and urine flushes out itself, the organisms are flushed out. Also, what are some certain mucosal factors that are present as an immune complex in man? We have studied that in urinary tract infections. Nobody remembers anything. Okay. These are certain risk factors for COTY. The risk factors could be device related, patient related or caregiver related. So it defines for itself. Can you see, if the device is placed in long term, more than 30 days or less than 30 days, organisms will change. As longer the catheterization, organisms like Proteus species will start growing. Okay. Then it also depends on the catheter material. If you're using silicone catheter, it might not help patient a lot. Silicone catheters are better than rubber catheters. The rubber catheters are considered lower to silicone catheters. Okay. Then there are patient related factors. Why female gender is written here? Females have short urethra. That is why. It's close proximity towards the anus. Then any underlying issue, if the patient has comorbidities, who has poor hygiene, incomplete emptying of the bladder, or if there is a fecal incontinence in this patient, it's very easy for the patient to develop UTI. Okay. Caregiver related factors. In case if the urinary catheter was put in without any aseptic precautions, if the hands were not washed properly and this patient was catheterized outside a safe zone, then he might develop a infection. Okay. How will you do the laboratory diagnosis? Through urine culture, right? Now, clinical there is this criteria that you have to follow, which includes three things. First, the patient has to be catheterized for more than 48 hours. Then there is a clinical criteria where you have to have one symptom at least. What are these symptoms in case of patient who do not have catheter? If there is catheter, will the patient tell you, I have a dysuria? That is why we are considering fever, suprapubic tenderness and costovertebral angle pain. Okay. And in urine culture criteria, you have to see if there is a presence of significant colony count. If there are 3 present, then you call it a COTY, catheter associated urinary tract infection. Okay. What is the treatment? You have to remove this catheter, give appropriate antibiotics, and in case of asymptomatic bacteriuria, there are certain cases that you have to treat, not all the cases. What are these cases that you have to treat? If the patient is pregnant, if there is certain neurological procedure he is undergoing where there is a blood loss indicated, okay, these people have to be treated. Otherwise, there is no indication for treating asymptomatic bacteriuria. Okay? Understood this much? This finishes COTY, which is the most common HAI. Take 5 minutes break. Then we'll deal with CLABSI, SSI and VAP. Any kind of intravenous arterial lines, but arterial lines are not included in CLABSI. Okay, first thing you have to know. In case of neonates, umbilical catheters are included. Okay, rest, when you are talking about CLABSI, CLABSI is the term only used for surveillance. Always remember this. When you see CRBCI, then you might think of treating the patient accordingly, but when you are talking about CLABSI, treatment is not used. Like, you cannot write it in the diagnosis of your patient. Okay? First thing to clarify. Then what are central lines? Central lines are the intravascular devices that terminate in the great vessels. What are you using these lines for? Pressure monitoring, drug administration, blood transfusion, total parenteral nutrition, all these things. Okay? You are using central lines or central venous catheter for all these things. So what happens? What happens when this central line is inserted into the patient? You see, there are certain areas where the infection can be there. If patient's own skin has microbial flora, which he had on his skin after he was admitted to the hospital. So there is a chance that MBROs have lodged into his skin, and the person who has put central line did not prepare the skin for this procedure, and this flora which was lodged on the skin entered into the bloodstream infection. So that is one thing. Second, this healthcare worker who inserted central line did not wash his hands properly or did not take necessary aseptic precautions, right? Or this person had other primary infection in the other site of the body. From there, the hematogenous route, through this route, this central line was also infected. There was a biofilm formation of the organism and this became a source of further infection. Okay? Or the contamination of devices at the fluid level or while maintaining this central line. You know that central lines are flushed with heparin so that the blood cannot be clotted, and whenever you are giving patient any injection or blood through the central lines, you have to scrub its hub with the alcohol. Yes, you have to scrub the hub with alcohol, you have to wear sterile gloves, then only you have to use the central line. You have to change the dressing. Okay, you have to look for the inflammation signs when a patient has central line. So these things are very important. So these are the sources of infection for CLABSI. Okay. How will you diagnose? What are the risk factors related? I told you there are three kinds of risk factors: device related, caregiver related and patient related. Patient related is the patient's own flora, right? Caregiver related, same as before, did not perform hand hygiene properly, no aseptic precaution, no proper skin preparation. Device related, some devices are tunneled, some are non-tunneled, some are there for longer duration, some you have to replace before time limit. So all these factors are there. Okay. Now how will you diagnose it? General rule is this for CLABSI, that you have to have one organism, one pathogenic organism from blood culture bottles that are collected from the same source, or one from the central line or one from the peripheral line. Either you can collect two bottles from the central line, Either you can collect one from central line, one from peripheral. Okay. But it has to yield a pathogenic organism. There is a little difference in case of people, patients less than 1 year of age, but that is too much detailing. You don't need to know all that. Just know what is clinical criteria and microbiological criteria. Okay. I told you CLABSI is only for surveillance purpose. Treatment depends on what organism is there. If a person is growing certain pathogenic organism in his blood, what will be the status of this person? The person is already in sepsis. Okay, so he has to be treated with broad spectrum antibiotics, especially tailored antibiotics for who's having specific sensitivity towards the drug. Okay, that is about CLABSI. Coming to ventilator associated pneumonia. When you talk about ventilator, everybody has seen a ventilator, at least in pictures. You have seen the ventilator. How is the patient put on ventilator? What is the procedure, like, if I may know? There is some tube inserted into the through mouth. Where it is inserted? Huh? Trachea. Okay. So there is, you have to perform mechanical intubation for this. We are not talking about the positive pressure devices or anything. We are particularly talking about intubation ventilation. Okay. Then what happens when you insert it? Again, I'll show you. This is the ET tube. Okay. This will go into your trachea. This is subglottic. This is below the epiglottis. Again, there is one inflation port to keep it in place. So when there is secretions, we call it subglottic secretions. These secretions might be aspirated by the patients, micro aspirations, and this can also lead to pneumonia. Okay, these things are there. What is the device or intervention related risk factors here? You are having subglottic aspiration, the cuff pressure was low, so it was, the secretions were seeping through the trachea. These secretions were harboring microorganisms. Okay, the duration of ventilation was longer. And in patient related, patient had any comorbidities, very elderly patient, advanced age patient, already had been hospitalized, so he was prone to all the MDROs before. Healthcare personnel related remains the same. He used the contaminated products, or the hands was not washed properly while doing this procedure. Okay. There is something called as CPIS system that we use for the diagnosis of VAP. In this system, there are certain parameters. What are these parameters? You have to see the patient's temperature, leukocyte count, if there are tracheal secretions, oxygenation of the patient, the ratio. Then if any newer infiltration or any local lesion is there on the chest radiography or tracheal aspirate. Okay. These are the parameters that you check, and if there is the score of more than 6, you consider it as VAP. What will be the maximum score? Maximum score will be 12. But if you see that the score is 6 for particular patient, you can suspect it as a VAP. Okay. For these parameters, see here, you have given 0, 1 and 2 points. For example, in case of leukocytes, 4 to 11 is the normal range. If it's less than 4 or more than 11, you give 1. Including band forms, you give 2. That is how you have differentiated the marks. Okay. If the score is more than 6, you call it VAP. Half of the people are looking into their phones. Okay, coming to surgical site infection. I'll not go into much detail. I told you what is surgical site infection. There are 3 kinds: superficial, deep and organ space. What is superficial? Skin and subcutaneous tissue. Below that, muscles and fascia, that is deep. Organ spaces involving a particular organ in the cavity, that is organ space. Okay, there are three kinds. Risk factors, the most crucial risk factor will be improper surgical scrub, improper skin preparation, improper wound care after the surgery, failure to give surgical antimicrobial prophylaxis, which is to be given within 1 hour before the surgery. Okay, all these factors can lead to SSI. Patient related most important things, comorbidities like diabetes mellitus, failure to heal the wound properly, okay, extreme age, more than 60 years of age, longer duration of hospital, higher wound class, dirty wound class, all these are important risk factors. Okay, this wound class type you should study in surgery class and tell me. Care bundle approach is not, I'm not teaching you what is care bundle approach. Then coming to HAI surveillance, for HAI surveillance you have to conduct it only in the high risk locations. What are these locations? ICUs and surgical wards. Okay. Then who will conduct it? Madam. ICNs will conduct this surveillance. Okay. Then what is the cycle that we have to maintain here? After this HAI surveillance and data collection, you have to analyze this data. What are you analyzing this data for? You are analyzing it for the rates, HAI rates. What are the rates of COTY, CLABSI, VAP, SSI in your hospital? Then you will interpret this data. If it's high, low, if you have improved from the last, and then you have to disseminate this data to the hospital staff and clinicians so that they could work in the respective areas where there are higher rates of HAI. Okay. Now coming to COTY, we discussed there are three criteria: device, clinical and microbiological criteria. You know that there has to be a presence of device for more than 2 days. Then has to be at least one symptom and significant count, bacterial count in UTI. We are only talking about bacteria here. If you bring a patient of trichomonas and claim that, oh, this patient got trichomonas and though you call it COTY, that will not happen. Okay. As about CLABSI, I told you there has to be one pathogen from the number of culture positive. One pathogen in any age. With symptoms or without symptoms, we consider as CLABSI. Okay? Criteria is little complex in case of ventilator associated pneumonia. There are 3 stages that you have to think of. First is ventilator associated condition. Okay? Where we have device criteria. What is this device criteria? Mechanical ventilator at least for 2 days. You pay attention for this very clearly. Okay? This is mechanical ventilation for 2 days, oxygenation criteria, this positive end expiratory pressure and FiO2. It has to be increased by 20% in case of FiO2 and in case of PEP more than 3 cm of water for at least 2 days. This is ventilator associated condition. When you diagnose patient with this condition, we come to stage 2, which is infection related ventilator associated complication. What does it has? It has any clinical criteria, any of the 4. So you will have to check the WBC count here along with fever or hypothermia. Hypothermia in case of infants. Okay, there will be no fever in infants. You will see for hypothermia also. Leukocytosis or leukopenia, more than 11, less than 4. When you find this, you go for antibiotic and see if newer antibiotic was started and continued for 4 days within infection window period. Okay? Like for 2 days you saw that the first PEP was growing for consecutive 2 days or FiO2 was going for consecutive 2 days, and you check this clinical criteria is matching any of this 4. And then you see that there was an antibiotic started which was continued for 4 days. This antibiotic was not there before. It was started during this period. Okay. Then you go for any possible ventilator associated pneumonia. If all these criteria are matching, you go for culture criteria. What is culture criteria? Isolation of significant count of pneumonia pathogen from respiratory specimen. This specimen could be tracheal or aspirate or BAL. All of these criteria are matching. We can call it PVAP. But initial 2 criteria are very important. If this is matching, we can call it ventilator associated condition. Okay. This you have to know. In case of SSI diagnosing is very, very easy. You have to know, you have to get any one of these following things. What is the first criteria? Clinical criteria. Presence of pus from the site. Very simple. You see the pus is coming from the operative site, SSI. Okay. Pus आ रहा है तो local signs of inflammations भी होंगे. Okay. Culture criteria. You took out the swab and sent it to laboratory, or pus specimen you send it out to laboratory, and laboratory is giving a significant pathogen. What will it show? Suppose there is a growth of a pathogenic organism, SSI. Or the most simple, the surgeon's diagnosis. A surgeon came for the rounds and he's telling this patient has developed an SSI. That also you consider for surgical site infection. Okay? Only in case of superficial SSI. For deep SSI, you will have to perform what? Histopathology or any radiological intervention, right? Suppose there was a cholecystectomy performed and the person had a drainage tube. Superiorly, you cannot see anything. But if in the drain there is pus, will you call this SSI? अगर कोई closed surgery है जिसमें ड्रेन डला हुआ है पेशेंट के, ऊपर से तुम्हें कुछ नहीं दिख रहा है, ऊपर एवरीथिंग इज ओके, suture site is clean, but the drain you have put is showing you a purulent secretion, will you call it an SSI? Bhaskar will go with all the brothers and sisters of India. It will be an SSI. Why? During surgery, the aseptic measures were not maintained. Maybe the forceps they were using or the suture or whatever they were using internally was not sterilized enough, okay, sterile enough. And then the person developed infection in the internal organs first, and consequently the above areas will also be involved. But to spot the SSI, you have to check the patient status and the area of surgery daily, okay. If patient underwent surgery, he has a drainage tube. The drainage tube and the site of infection, site of suture is clean, nothing is there. And the patient developed abscess in certain other area. Is it an SSI? No. Okay. So use techniques to follow the words. Surgical site infection. Site of surgery only developing the infection, that is SSI. Okay. How do you calculate these rates? I told you we calculate the rates. All these rates are calculated in thousands. Okay. Except surgical site infection, they are calculated in percentages. What is the formula? Formula remains the same for all. Number of, for example, number of COTY cases divided by number of total urinary catheter days. How will you calculate catheter days? Suppose 9 patients got admitted in the month of January. One patient had catheter for 3 days. One patient had catheter for 5 days. You will combine all these catheters days, okay, and you will see how many of them developed COTY. And then, so this is per 1,000 beds, per 1,000 patients. Okay? Okay, that was HAI for you. Any questions? One of the standard precautions was to discard your sharps properly. Disposal of the sharps properly. Acha, can we name the standard precautions? Hand hygiene. Gloves standard precaution नहीं है. वो किस में आता है वो बोलो. Huh? PPE. Then Biomedical waste management. Then sharp disposal. Then spillage management. Very good. Then respiratory and cough etiquette. कुछ रह गया? Very important. What do you do daily? Do you guys clean your rooms? Disinfection of the rooms. Huh? Environmental cleaning. Okay? These are very important standard precautions. Out of this, there is needle stick injury. We want to talk about occupational exposure here. Needle stick injury is only a part of it. When there is a splash of blood or any bloody fluid on a person who is treating the patient in the healthcare setup, we call it occupational hazard or occupational injury. It could include the splash, it could include cuts with sharps, it could include the needle prick. Okay? So, what do you call it? There could be a percutaneous injury where you are getting a prick by the needle or cut by a sharp blade or scalpel or something like that. Or there is a splash and contact with your mucous membranes. What are the mucous membranes we are talking about here? Eyes and oral cavity, oral mucosa, and even nose. Okay. Or even the non-intact skin but prolonged duration. This is very unusual, but it is included. Okay. Then what is the risk? What are the agents transmitted here? Hepatitis B, C, E virus, and other agents are also there, but mostly we fear the risk of transmission because this risk of transmission is very high in case of hepatitis B. How much is it in hepatitis C? HCV, and then 0.3% for HIV. Okay, I think I have taught you about this before, risk factors and mode of transmission, right? Okay. Then coming to what are potentially infectious body fluids. Can you see that all these things that are there, they are either contaminated with blood or they are almost not available without any intervention. For CSF, you have to perform lumbar puncture, synovial fluid arthroscopy, then pleural tapping you have to do, peritoneal fluid. All these things are not readily available from the patient. You have to perform certain things on him, right? Then not considered potentially infectious. These are that does not have visible contamination with the blood. If they have visible contamination with the blood, these will also become potentially infectious. What are these? Feces, nasal secretions, vomitus, okay, tears, saliva, urine, sweat, all these. If there is blood, this will also become potentially infectious. So, if this is even falling on you, this will also become an occupational hazard. Then factors that influence the risk of contracting infection. The volume which came in contact with you, the wide bore needles, how deep was the wound or cut, any visible blood on the device that you got injured with, okay. If the viral load of this patient was high, if you did not take any preventive measures on time, all these factors will influence the risk of transmission, okay. Then how do you prevent needle stick injuries? First is you have to follow all the standard precautions. Work surfaces are to be disinfected. All the healthcare workers have to be immunized with hepatitis B virus. Okay, spillage has to be dealt with, spill management and not to be mopped generally like we do in the hospital. Okay, do not recap the needles, do not handle the sharps without trays and discard the generated sharp at the site of generation. This is the single scoop method. This method is right. How many of you understood what is happening here? You're not supposed to recap the needles like this. Okay. Suppose this is the cap. This cap is lying here. This is a needle. I am holding a needle and syringe. So I will scoop it like this, and with single hand, this cap I'll close it like this if needed. Otherwise, this is not recommended. You just have to take this needle was there. You have to discard this needle in white container and go on your way. Post exposure management, what happens? If there is a splash, what will you do? You will clean your eyes or whatever mucosal surface with the clean water. सोडियम हाइपोक्लोराइड मत डाल देना आंखों में, ठीक है? दूसरा क्या करना है? If there is a needle prick, do not use any disinfectants. Do not put that finger in the mouth. Do not squeeze it. Do not squeeze and remove the blood. Do not do anything that will cause the organism to get sucked in the blood. Okay? Just wash it with plain water and soap. That's the first aid. Then you report the designated nodal officer. You go and meet them. If advised, take the first dose of prophylaxis measures. Then you perform the baseline titers. Baseline of healthcare worker. खुद का भी testing करवाना है serological status जानने के लिए along with the patient. If patient is unknown, all of that will be decided by the nodal officer what is to be done. Then you document and record all this, follow up, and then if you are on the PEP, if you have to take post-exposure prophylaxis, which is for 28 days in case of HIV, do not discontinue your prophylaxis because you had side effects. And if given a chance, when you talk to a certain person who has been taking PEP, you will realize that it is very tough to continue these drugs because there are major side effects and people usually they discontinue taking these drugs, but that is not recommended. Okay. What is the NACO guideline given to you? We have exposure code and source code. So when you talk about exposure code and source code, you have to first know that what kind of source material you have come in contact with. If it is anything out of this or contaminated with blood, you have to see that if it was a mild exposure. What do you mean by mild exposure? Small volumes or less duration. If it is moderate exposure, what do you mean by that? Large volume or more duration. Okay. Or percutaneous superficial exposure, that is also included in exposure code 2. What is EC code 3, where you do not have to think about anything? It's a very large volume or deep injury. Rest 2 to we do not even need to discuss. If it was there in your patient, it was inserted in the patient's artery or vein and there was a visible blood on the device, you consider it as exposure code 3. So there are 3 exposure codes. Then you talk about source code. What is source code? Source code 1 and 2 are both positive, but only source code 1 is asymptomatic HIV patient, source code 2 is symptomatic HIV patients. Okay. Source unknown. What will you do in this case? If source is unknown, what will you do? Source is unknown, depending on the exposure code or irrespective of that, you will be given with the post-exposure prophylaxis. And if HIV negative patient is there, if the serology status of patient is known and is negative serology, then you do not have to do anything in any cases. Okay. First dose of PEP is to be taken within 2 hours or within 72 hours. Beyond 72 hours, there is no point of taking any kind of post-exposure prophylaxis. Okay. What are the drugs recommended? According to the recent guidelines for HIV, you have to do tenofovir, lamivudine and dolutegravir. Okay, 1 tablet for 28 days OD. That is there. Or alternative regimen is TLE, tenofovir, lamivudine and efavirenz 6 milligrams. This is the alternative regimen, but the most recent recommended regimen is TLD, tenofovir, lamivudine and dolutegravir. Common side effects and all, you know what could be the side effects. In case of in case of hepatitis B positive patient, if the patient is not, if the healthcare worker is not vaccinated, you are recommended to take immunoglobulin. Immunoglobulin will provide you immunity up to 3 months. You have to take vaccination alongside. do not presume that after 2 doses of vaccination, the patient is protected. You have to perform the protective titer after 2 months of completing the vaccination. What is the vaccination schedule? 0, 1 and 6 months. After, at 8th month, you will do titer. If this titer, and if you got this injury after, let's say, 3 years or 4 years, you have to perform the titer. If this titer is above 10 international units, you are protected. If not, then the person has to repeat the vaccination. Okay? That is about hepatitis B virus. Do we have any cure for hepatitis C virus? How many of you say no? You say wrong. Okay, you need to study. That's all about needle stick injury.